Welcome to IAMTV. I'm Alan Keyes, and this is Let's Talk America. Today I'm continuing what was a profound and I think very helpful discussion with Paul Cottrell. You met him, and I think he gave us a display of both the remarkable depth of his understanding that he acquires when he takes an interest in something. So he has a kind of eclectic background that I'll ask him to tell you a little bit about that allows him then to both get into the details, for instance, of what's actually happening at the cellular level and at the level of RNA in this coronavirus that we're all talking about, and what this actually implies for vaccines and other things, at the same time that he has experience in analyzing the markets, financial markets, and thinking about the economics of our situation and the situation in the world in such a way as to be able to understand how the crisis we're in and the remedy that we've been using affect the economy and what our ability is likely to be to deal with this crisis in the future. We're going to get back into this discussion right after these words.
More IAMTV episodes? We are now streaming through Roku. Roku is a device that enables you to stream entertainment to your TV through your internet provider. The starting price is only $29, and you can purchase one either online or through your local electronics retailer. It's easy to use, and you won't have to worry about missing any more IAMTV episodes. IAMTV, changing the world.
Podcasts are great when you're a multitasking person. You can listen to them around the house, when you're out in the car, when you take a walk. Now we have put our shows on to podcasts, and you can listen to Let's Talk America on podcasts. You can find them at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor FM, and other apps. While you're there, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our new episodes. Thanks for listening and supporting us. Together, we're changing the world. Welcome back. And welcome again to Paul Cottrell. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining me again. And before we get started on the topics at hand, I wonder whether you would say a little bit about yourself and your background and how you came to have this wealth of insight into different areas that now turn out to be fundamentally and importantly related as we're considering the crisis we're in, but also the possibilities of how to deal with it and what that implies for our future. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, so just to start, most people think I'm much younger than I am, so I'm 47. So I've had the opportunity to have different types of careers in automotive and in finance, and moving towards my medical career. And so that's part of the function. But academically, I went for my undergrad at Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. That was a Bachelor's of Science, and then earned my MBA in finance also at Wayne State University. Then I did my PhD in finance. My dissertation was focused on modeling oil and currency markets using artificial intelligence. That was through Walden University. Then during that process, my brother died from heart disease. So that pushed me in a direction to want to pursue medicine. And so because I live in New York City, I enrolled and finished the pre-medical program at Fordham University. And at that same time, I was working on and I'm near completion of my master's program at Harvard University in biology, and then pursue an MD degree. I've already been accepted to medical school. So I have a lot of different life experiences in career, in automotive engineering, in finance. Managed a portfolio for a very large nonprofit in New York City. It was Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of New York for many years before pursuing my medical education. And so it allows me to, see problems in a more polymath type way, that it's not just one pillar. It's not one discipline. It's taking a research question and looking at it and attacking it from different vector points.
Well, when we were beginning our discussion in a previous program, I was struck by the fact that one of the things you said early on is one of those things that folks who watch my show here know that I often will have a tendency to do, which is not only to talk about all the different material, physical, institutional, whatever aspects of something, but really also to be thinking with an awareness of what is the moral challenge. What is the challenge to that aspect of our nature as human beings that require that we mobilize our internal resources, resources of our spirit, of our soul, as it were, so that we're able to stick to and commit ourselves to necessary courses of action and summon up the concentration and the perseverance and the courage and deal with the discouragement. Because you raised the issue of fear. And it struck me as interesting because as I have watched over the last several weeks what some of the governors around the country have done with the quarantine and the stay-at-home, shelter in place, and other kinds of approaches, some of them have really been over the top, as they say, right? It's like they have something else in mind and they're trying to get us used to it or something. And it is true, a lot of them wear the big D Democrat label, but I still think that across the board, we do have a few presidents that we admire in spite of what might be our ideological differences with them. Most of us still thrill a little bit at the speech that Roosevelt gave as he was taking over to deal with the Great Depression, in which he said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Now, I'm not entirely sure that's true, because depending on what you're fearing, the Bible says the beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord. So there's a kind of fear that you don't have to be afraid of. You might even be anxious to have it, so it'll give you the right motive to keep going after that kind of knowledge. But the truth is, though, in our present situation, fear is essential. It's being manipulated in various ways, but it's also, in some ways, a natural result of a situation where you feel threatened. And that threat is being, in one way or another, offered to you as something relatively inescapable. And if somebody offers you a way to escape it, then you want to take it and you'll listen because you're reasonably decent. You don't want to die yourself. You don't want to be out there killing other people. And I thought two things were true. I was impressed by the fact that we still seem to be a people overall of goodwill. So that if somebody says, do this because if you don't do this, it's going to be bad for you, but you'll also be hurting others. We have a lot of Americans who are willing to say, well, I understand that. I don't want to be somebody who's out there making it all worse for everybody. I want us to get out through this. And they listen. They hear and they obey. But they obey voluntarily. They obey from a good place within themselves where they say, this is going to do some good. And that, I think, is part of our being law-abiding. But then I remember that the country was also built by people of extraordinary courage, right? Who came to New World, who came from foreign places, who were brought here by folks forcibly, whatever it is that brought them to America. It required courage for them to endure, to progress, to build, to survive. And they showed that courage over generations. Do you think that this test of courage is something that the American people are going to fail?
I believe, as I was saying to you behind the scenes, is that this is our finest hour. We can rise up and protect our Constitution and reach the ideals, the ethical ideals that you're talking about, that the flag represents. What Abraham Lincoln stated is that our job is to make a more perfect union. It's not perfect, but that's our job, to make it more perfect one generation at a time. We can do this if we work together. It's we, the people. We can do this. But when they divide us, or at least we have the thought that we can't work together, then that's when the powers that be that are instituting these technocratic type mechanisms have power over us.
Well,
We
see,
need to work together.
I think, Paul, they've been very clever, though, because
Of
the
course
means that they've been using, they are appealing to us to act for everybody's sake, right? Something that seems to represent an appeal to come together. But we're going to do it by staying apart. Isn't that clever?
Mm-hmm.
So at one and the same time, they're inviting us to do something that looks like it brings us together, but in fact, it is slyly isolating us from one another, increasing our diffidence so that we have to cope with our fears in that isolation.
On the surface, the ones that are instituting these shelter-in-place policies, they're thinking that they're winning. I think they're losing, and the reason why is that there is in the citizenry there is a growing anger and a realization as they're becoming more educated on what's happening on these different pillars that we were talking about, the scientific pillar, the civil liberties pillar, the geopolitical pillar, that they're realizing that there was orchestration with this disease, this pandemic. And there's going to be prosecutions. There needs to be prosecutions. There needs to be investigations. And people like Fauci need to be investigated. But there is an Occupy movement happening again behind the scenes, but it's not as centralized as it was during the Occupy Wall Street movement. This is going to be decentralized, where all the citizens realize that they have to go to their state house or their city hall and start protesting. And people are starting to do this now. This is happening in Arizona. This happened in Michigan. And they'll spin it in a way where it's like, well, these are just neo-Nazis and all this stuff, but that's not what it is. What it is that they're tired of the tyranny of the government taking away the civil liberties of the citizens. And there is going to be an awakening, and it's going to be decentralized. I believe this is going to be that Boston Tea Party moment where we just basically say we have had enough. Enough is enough. We're taking back our country. But the most powerful thing that we have, not just the Constitution, not just our flag and our ethical ideals, is the power of a mother, the power of that motherly instinct. And there are an awful lot of mothers out there that have trepidation on a forced vaccine program. And you galvanize a bunch of mothers, against a messenger RNA platform that Fauci is going to be trying to promote here in the near future, especially with this Operation Warp Speed. It's probably going to happen in February. You're probably going to see an awful lot of pitchforks out there, and it's not going to be males. It's going to be females with children that are very concerned about their well-being. And this is where these ones that have orchestrated this and to try to erode our civil liberties and push this Bio-Patriot Act that I was talking about on the previous episode, they will be that catalyst. These women will step up to the plate and protect their children. It's a motherly instinct that's built into their biology. And the powers that be they're underestimating that, and this growing anger within the citizenry with the loss of jobs. We're already, we already had a huge loss of jobs in the last report that just came out. We're at like 15% or 14% unemployment. We have tens of millions of people out of work. Everyone knows that someone either has been furloughed, is laid off, or has had their hours cut, and they're eroding our wealth and our health. And the citizens are getting to the point where they don't want to be putting up with edicts by Governor Cuomo and and other governors like the one in Michigan that are telling them how to live their life. I mean, you've heard the story of the mayor, I think it was in Chicago, where she went and had her hair done, but she told the citizens that they would, be arrested or fined if they stepped out of their house. This is, and I mean, there's this is do as I say and not as I do philosophy. Like they're sitting on a golden throne. People will not put up with this.
I think what I thought of and what I think of when I see episodes like that is that it reflects the true nature of what they're pushing us toward. Because a lot of people will talk as if they're all interested in our unity and union, and everybody's got to be equal and respected in their worth and respected in their rights. And then they say and do things when they get into power that actually emphasize the cleavage between those who rule and those who are ruled, those who command and those who must obey. And there's no sense of equality there. Also, those who have and those who have not, and therefore, when you are in a certain position, the rules don't apply to you, right? We want everybody else to do all these things to respect the environment, but we'll keep driving around the limos, flying around in private planes, and doing all that we criticize in everybody else. Because, and here's the final rub for me, because I think the final phrase in that boast is because we're people and you're not. See? And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean the attitude that was taken down through the ages. That's why, though we don't pick it up anymore, even in England, a place like that, the English language, the word that was applied to folks who were, part of the upper class and ruling class and all that, they were called the gentry. And the word gentry is rooted ultimately in the word in Latin gens that meant people, right? So if you were the commander and the ruler and everything, you counted for something. You were a person, and everybody else was just like a tool. No more like you than the horse you ride, or the cattle that you use for food, or the cow that you milk for milk. And wasn't this the position of a lot of people in the world vis-a-vis their so-called betters throughout most of human history and a lot of societies everywhere? Some different version of this occurred all the time. It was only in a large way, in a thoroughgoing way, when the United States was founded on the premise that we're all created equal and that we're all people. And we come together as such in order to meet our responsibilities and obligations to ourselves, to our families, to our communities, consulting on a free basis, using our best judgment, and acting with a free and voluntary will. They seem to want to move us now on the excuse of this threat into a coercive surrender of that sense of our responsibility. Am I wrong? Do you think Americans are going to put up with this?
I think you're right that the powers that be are trying to orchestrate that. They want to put us back into the concept that we're subjects of the king or the queen, and but the American spirit won't allow that. It won't allow it, and if push comes to shove, there will be rioting that takes place. Hopefully, what happens during this Occupy movement, what we call Occupy America, but in this decentralized Occupy America movement, it's going to be peaceful. But there is a point in time that if the government doesn't listen to the people and they institute policies like the BioPatriot Act and force vaccines and take away your ability to freely assemble and to bear arms, it is the right and the obligation of the citizen to fight the government. That is written in our Constitution. What it is it's being spun in the media is that how dare you question Governor Cuomo? How dare you assemble at City Hall in New York City, which happened over the weekend, and it was disbanded by Governor Cuomo. An edict by Governor Cuomo, and the NYPD forced the individuals to leave the premise. That was unconstitutional. They were peacefully assembling.
Right. See, I think that we're going to be faced with more of those situations, Part of my worry, though, is that they wanted to preoccupy us with staying apart for the sake of the common good, right? We need to come together and consult in common, but it's still in order to serve the good of all. But their way of preoccupying us with that service actually destroys the good that in America we're supposed to have in common, which is, and what distinguishes us from peoples in a lot of times and places on earth, is our common good, our res publica, the thing we have in common, is our liberty, our ability to act freely according to our conscientious judgment of what it is right to do for ourselves, for our families, for our communities. That is our kind of common good. It's our distinctive characteristic, but it implies a responsibility. A question which we'll start talking about now, but I'd like to carry it over into the next section. Start with this immediate crisis. How do we approach it in a way that actually calls on the American people to deal with the threat in that responsible way? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So
well,
that instead of saying, here's what you must do, stay apart, do this, do that, you say, we are faced with this challenge, and we want you all to consult and work together using the various expertise from doctors and physicists and lawyers and everybody else to come together and figure out what is the best approach consistent with our character as a free people to deal with this crisis. Wouldn't that be the American way to handle this?
Absolutely. And we have to take risks. Like I was saying before, is that the American spirit, its ethos, is taking risks and exploring. And we cannot be just a bunch of germaphobes and hiding at home. There's two enemies here: the virus that they designed, and the top-down government that's being instituted. We have to fight both, and we have to fight both with common sense. And I'm saying that with a throwback to the revolutionary times, you know. So, you know, so Thomas Paine, you know, is we have to use common sense to solve this problem, all right? All right, and we want to go back to work. We don't want to erode our wealth. We don't want to go in default and lose our homes and stuff like this. People will have to get out of shelter in place, go back to work. Maybe there is a mezzanine period where people go back to work in rotations instead of you may be doing remote. If you're still employed and you're doing all remote, maybe certain number of employees are remoting on Monday and Tuesdays, and the others are doing a remote on alternating days. And that way you slowly bring the population fully back into the workforce or at the office. But some jobs you can't do that. In manufacturing, you can't do that. Mm. So you can design workstations in such a way where it allows for that 6 feet of distancing. But I don't think you need to do that for very long. I think that 6 feet of distancing would probably only need to last for no more than 8 weeks.
Well, that question of how long and what things will we be doing in the interim is something I'd like to get into a little bit more specifically when we get back from this short break, because I think thinking through the ways in which we translate ideas into a more effective way of safeguarding ourselves to the extent required from the threat of the virus and its spread, but at the same time allow us to work together in order to make sure that the threat of economic destitution doesn't overtake our country. Is it possible? We'll be talking about that right after this. Hi, I'm Alan Keyes. I just want to let you know that on a recurring basis every Tuesday, we're going to have a guest, Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. He's going to be joining us to talk about the whole array of challenges, both in terms of our health as a people and as individuals, and our health as a nation. We'll be looking at those things through the eyes of someone who has thought deeply about many things and who has many great ideas to share with me and with you and with everyone who tunes in to Let's Talk America on Tuesdays, when we meet with the Health Ranger to talk about how we sustain the health of our liberty. Welcome back. I am continuing a fascinating, I think, and very fruitful conversation with Paul Cottrell. We're talking, yes, about the COVID-19 and the crisis that is upon us, and the various ways in which we have been responding to that crisis, the problems that arise from that. I'd like to turn this part of the discussion, Paul, a little bit toward the question of the positive way that we can go about fighting the fight to safeguard lives to the extent that we can against viral infection over a period of time that we can't be certain how long it's going to last or what the exact nature of the threats might be, but that is then consistent with what ought to be the sworn mission of everybody who ever works for any level of government in the United States, because they, all of them of any significance, have to swear an oath to preserve, protect, and defend or uphold and protect the Constitution of the United States. And that means the way of doing business, the way of living, the institutions that put responsibility and choice in the hands of our people in the face of every crisis. This crisis, that crisis, but all the crises. And that have representatives who remember that at the end of the day, they act on behalf of the people that they're supposed to represent. They are not rulers. They are, all of them, representatives who then, acting for us, represent the kind of discipline that's in our common interest that we impose upon ourselves for the sake of our common good. Now, if you were in charge of the task force, let's say we managed to get a task force that's actually dealing with the whole task, because we've sort of put the epidemiologists in charge and spread of the virus becomes the preoccupation. What if dealing with the virus, while to the extent humanly possible preserving the health and workability of our economy, was the goal? I think you would put somebody with a broader vision than the epidemiologists in charge. They'd still be on the task force, but they wouldn't be in charge of it. Somebody with that kind of vision would be in charge of it. So let me say that I put you in charge. One of the things I find missing is that while we're waiting on the vaccine of whatever kind, we have to deal with the actual damage that is done by the virus. Shouldn't we be consulting with frontline people and getting a sense of the ways in which and the therapies with which we might be able to decrease the death rate and help people to continue to live their lives even if they are infected?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. You know, there's some evidence, strong evidence, that shows that if you do protease inhibitors early on, that you reduce the viral load to increase in the body and cause the more clinical problems like the non-ARDS issue that we were talking about earlier. So, you know, early detection is important. Early treatment. Where they went wrong was they weren't using the protease inhibitors at the very beginning. The hydroxychloroquine with the Z-Pak early on shows that it's beneficial to certain patients, not all, because of the comorbidity and the issues and the you know the side effects, managing those side effects. Remdesivir is coming out on the market, so that's going to be another tool in the toolbox. I'm not a fan of a vaccine program. I'm not anti-vax, but I am not for a messenger RNA platform that is cutting corners, and I'm not for a messenger RNA platform that doesn't have long-term testing because it's new. We don't know what it does to our oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. We just don't know. For people to say that they know, it's not true. They don't know because it wasn't tested. So, that's the scientific side of this. The nutraceutical side. There's a nutraceutical side to this.
Before you move on to that, though, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What did you think? And I have a view on this, which I'll probably state at some point. But President Trump, a little while back, said something that they immediately jumped down his throat and said this is somehow ridiculous, because he looked at the fact that my sitting at this table, right, even in the quarantine lockdowns, spatial distancing and everything, we wiped this table off with disinfectant products. And the disinfectant products, some of them are 99.9% effective against viruses of various kinds. And the president was speculating, raising the question, is there any way that we could, take something that acts with that ability and use it in the body? Is there anything like that? And they acted like the very thought that you would research something like that is crazy. Step number one, is it crazy to see something that gets the job done and then say, is there any way that this could be formulated, adapted, that some other thing could be used to achieve the same kind of results and get that effect of killing germs, viruses, whatever, in the body? I thought that was the way science worked. And if you made an observation, I was introduced a couple years ago to the story of a fellow who was doing some work in Africa, as I recall, and people who were on his workforce, they were having trouble with malaria, right? And they were all of them falling sick, and he had this water, the only water supply he had, and they had to disinfect it. And they put some disinfectant in it. I think it contained chlorine dioxide, used in the water. They gave it to the people to drink. They just wanted to help help them cope with their condition. And by the next day, they were all up and around. And by the second day, they were practically dancing. They were so, sort of free of the pest. Now, if somebody told you that story as a scientist, what would be your reaction? What would you do with that information? We gave them this, and it had this in it, and after we gave it to them, they showed no signs of chlorine dioxide. Not chlorine dioxide, no signs of malaria. What would you try to do?
Well,
would you laugh at them and say, you drunk bleach? That's crazy. Or you put disinfectant in your body? That's crazy. Or what would you say?
Well, I would say, let's investigate this.
Yes.
Maybe this is the proper way to go. Maybe nature has given us a little knock on the head and saying, hey, try this.
Why aren't they doing that? Why isn't an important part of this task force looking at every possibility out there that is related to relieving the syndrome, to relieving the problems, to relieving the suffering of the patients, that sort of frontline mentality? Why isn't it being applied as well as the waiting for the vaccine approach?
Well, there's a big pushback in the press corps because they have this syndrome called Orange Man Bad, right? They think that everything that Donald Trump does is wrong, and I'm a Trump supporter. I have been a Trump supporter from day one, and will continue to be a Trump supporter. But I'm critical at times on certain things that he says or does. No one's perfect, but I think he's doing the best that he can. But I don't believe that this problem needs to be managed by epidemiologists. It needs to be managed by people that have broad backgrounds or broad perspectives, because that's where the synthesis is going to be coming from. You'll have experts. This is why we have a cabinet, for the president. You have experts within certain domains, and the president takes that information and synthesizes it. And through that synthesis comes to some sort of policy. Fauci has only one domain of knowledge. And that is, his research in HIV and infectious diseases. So, and he's compromised, because of the weapons program. Do they want, this is a real question. Do they really want an easy solution? Because if there is an easy solution, you don't need the messenger RNA platform. Why is he constantly pushing Moderna for the messenger RNA platform? Why is he not, looking into distributed bio for the antibody version of the vaccine, which is a lot harder to put in a Trojan horse? See, there seems to be alternative motives here. And if if you follow the money, if you follow the patents, if you follow the research from George Webb on the Fort Detrick weapons program and who was involved, you're gonna see that these people are compromised. So if I was on the task force, if I was Pence, who I believe is the true quote leader of the task force, I would be investigating Fauci. He's a compromised individual, and I don't understand why people in Congress aren't investigating it. I think the reason is that because of association, it would put a dark cloud over Trump, and they don't want to do that at this moment in time. But I believe that these individuals that are up on stage orchestrating these are trying to solve this problem, quote, solve the problem, has an alternative agenda. And that's this messenger RNA platform. It's interesting that there's strong similarities to what happened when they repealed Glass-Steagall, all right, and the financial crisis for Lehman, all right. It was Larry Summers who was a major player in that, repeal during Clinton, all right, and Rubin, all right. Well, fast forward to the Lehman crash, and who's up on stage with Obama? Larry Summers. All right. Well, who was involved in the Fort Detrick weapons program? Fauci and Birx and Redfield. Well, who's up on stage right now with the Wuhan crisis? Fauci, Birx, Redfield. See, I see a pattern here, and when I see a pattern, then I have to come to a conclusion as a scientist that there is a cover-up. And who do you want to run the show? The best people to run the show to prevent something to be leaked out, or the mass to understand what was happening to them decades ago, is to have the individuals that were the designers of these policies and these programs to run it, to run the crisis management, because they can hide it. There's something going. If you just look at how Birx reacted when President Trump was asking these questions, I think that in a strange way, and how she put her head down when she was sitting down along, up against the wall, and he said, maybe we can wipe the lungs, with some sort of disinfectant and stuff like that. The way the press corps interpreted it is, well, the president doesn't know what he's talking about. No, I think that was a major slap to Birx, saying, I know what you did, and that there are things out there that the CDC is trying to prevent the American public to use to increase to have the ability to increase their immune system so they have a fighting chance to fight this virus. And so if everyone's sick, then they're going to push this messenger RNA platform. But if people start taking more D3, taking more K2, and doing these nutraceuticals and using these other disinfectants or antimicrobial things that are homeopathic, antiviral things, that they'll boost their immune system and have a fighting chance where they can make their own antibody instead of the Fauci antibody, which may actually kill you. So this is, I think Trump actually knows that these people are involved in this, but he's circled by sharks, and he's doing the best that he can to go through the crisis in a responsible way, but also somehow shed a light with these little potshot comments that he makes. Remember he made that statement, and Fauci put his hand on his face when he was talking about the deep state a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
These are these little potshot comments that he's basically saying that I know what you guys did. I don't know because of I don't know how to get out of it yet, but I know what you did. But I think it would be nice to see a president say, you know what? We are going to have Fauci investigated, and we're going to understand what happened at Fort Detrick, and we are going to be honest with the American public and just say we made a mistake, we went down a road, we stopped it in 2014, but we continued the development in another country to get around the regulations, and we shouldn't have done it. But what we're going to do is we're going to fix the problem and just be honest to the American public, and then the American public will actually know what we're dealing with. But instead, we got people that are up on stage lying to the American public and pushing an agenda, which is an element of the Biopatriot Act. And this is going to upset. This is the point that I was making with the women that have children. These mothers, the motherly instinct is going to kick in, and there's negative feedback loop. These people like Fauci, they think that they can do A plus B will get them to their goal. Well, they don't realize that there's a negative feedback loop, and it's called the motherly instinct, and it's going to come back to haunt them. It's going to come back with a vengeance.
I think that Trump also, though, has opportunities that are not yet being taken. And example, and again, it's taken from the president who I guess would be most popular with some of these folks who are hate Trump so much, and that's FDR. But as I recall, FDR used to have the administrative habit of sometimes assigning different people to different aspects of the same task. And that set up a little bit of a competition, which turned out sometimes to be good for the ideas and innovations that would come out of it. What if Donald Trump were to establish what we might call the Interim Therapies Task Force, right? While we're waiting on the vaccine, I'm going to ask this group to take a look at all of the different things that can be done to help deal with the specific effects that the virus has on the lungs, the specific effect that the virus has on the availability of oxygen to the rest of the system, and on what is happening in the bloodstream and so forth, to see if there are ways in which we can give people help in either dealing with or compensating for the damage that is being done to them while we're waiting for the virus. See?
This is what I call the MacGyver effect. See? People that used to watch MacGyver in the 80s, because I'm a Gen Xer. Whenever MacGyver was in a problem, he looked at what was around him and made something to get him out of the problem. Well, we have a problem, and we have to look at the resources that we have and MacGyver it. We need Operation MacGyver.
See, but I think that though they claim that Trump was somehow indifferent to death, I think that it's in fact the Faucis and Bill Gateses and others of the world pushing all this vaccine stuff who are indifferent to the death toll that could be reduced if you were assigning people to look at what is actually happening and has happened in the experience of the world, in the experience of clinical research, that would be applicable to helping to deal with the effects that the virus are having, so that while we wait for the vaccine, fewer people would die because we're helping them to get through this situation. I think he could do that and still have, emphasis on vaccine approach up to
but what will happen? What will happen is there'll be an awakening that there is a lot of benefit using homeopathy. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of benefit of supplementation, and it reopens the discussion on the allopathic medicines. The idea that you have to medicate.
Do you know what
for example, For example,
Yeah.
you know, my father is in his 70s, and he has, you know, some blood pressure issues. He takes Crestor, all right, to reduce his blood pressure. But I've noticed in just the last 6 months, and he's been on it for about 15 years or more, I've noticed that there is a deterioration in his cognitive ability. Now, most people don't realize that you need cholesterol to have proper neural health. All right. Well, if you can tell people that you don't need to be taking these Crestor-like medications, and that there's a natural way to do this to get you off of them, and so you don't have these neurological dysfunctions, don't you think people would do them? But it would take so much money out of big pharma, because you're talking about billions of dollars every year generated for people that need to take medications like Crestor to reduce, you know, lipids and, you know, and reduce cholesterol. It opens up, it shines a light on a lot of the fallacies that are being promoted to the public. So unfortunately, in America is a great place, but unfortunately, there's not enough individuals that have a science background or a mathematics background or an engineering background. And it's very easy for the powers that be to take advantage of that situation. And the citizens don't have the base to ask a critical question, to say, well, wait a minute, Fauci, that messenger RNA, that's a Trojan horse, all right? Most people don't understand what a vaccine is or does. You know, so people for me, I noticed that I had to spend a lot of time just to get to a certain baseline with my subscribers, so they can go to the next level of conversation. The level, you know, we're dealing with level 1, but there is a level 3 and a level 4 and a level 5 conversation that really needs to be talked about, and that's where the powers that be are working under. They're working at a level 4 level, but the conversation that's going on in the mass media is a level 1, at best a level 2. And that's the reason why they're always a few steps ahead of us. It's because they bought into this idea that that science isn't important. Science is very important, and I hope that children that are watching, you know, this whole thing, they get galvanized to be engineers and scientists and doctors and be those problem solvers, you know, get those PhDs, get those master's degrees, and make a society a better place, a more positive social change.
One thing that could come out of a crisis like this would be a kind of reborn incentive that is not associated with, if I do that, I'll make a lot of money.
Right.
But associated with being in a situation like this, where science was relevant to doing good and saving lives and preserving the opportunities for our society to be productive and to function at its best, and be drawn to seek that scientific knowledge as an element of your dedication to the preservation of your way of life. I think that's absolutely critical. You're right. And it's what folks like you manifest, and what others need to, I think, be inspired by, because that will produce a result that isn't always infected with motives of power or profit, but also has motives of public spirit, dedication to a task that elevates their fellow man, and also, by reducing the threat in the environment, allows us to move with greater courage toward even more difficult challenges, which is what I think both our world and our increased knowledge of what lies beyond this world in our solar system and what's out there represented now in Trump's work by the Space Force to challenge us for the future. This crisis could lead to a kind of rebirth of that kind of interest, that kind of dedication, that kind of courage. But I think we're going to have to break the mold that Fauci has been forcing on us in order to produce those results. And I hope that if he picks up on things that folks like you are saying and that people are doing to try to offer an alternative vision of what are the steps we should be taking. Maybe we'll get to that place. As we deal with this crisis, it will turn out to have been something that lifts us to a higher plane of potential and realizing our potential as a people instead of giving it up. Thank you. And thank you for joining me in getting us to a point, because I think opening people's eyes to the fact that there's a different and better way will lead them to appreciate that Donald Trump was trying to do just that when he may ask those questions, and those questions need to be answered. As I always say, I hope everybody out there, you'll think about this, ponder it, and then join us again here at Let's Talk America.